Today, we're going to break down for tanks not your normal look at these simple tricks to improve, but real concepts as a team, when to push, how to maintain pressure, how to properly switch between when you realize that your dive tank isn't working, how a dive tank works, how positioning can be monumental, and how to use your ultimates properly, and why tanks can be the biggest game changer in Marvel Rivals. No more just being a meat shield, you're going to improve and be the biggest change for your team. Let's get into it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be learning a lot today about an off tank, about main tanks, when to switch to a different tank, but also pathing and also focus fire. There's a lot to break down. This is going to be a longer video, but you're going to realize the importance of a good tank, but also of a good healer and what your DPS can do and how much it can create space and pressure. We're going to learn a lot together. I'm not the best tank, but just watching this, it is extremely educational, and you'll see just how valuable a tank and a healer can be in every scenario. So let's go ahead and pause right here because this is already important. One of the biggest things that you'll notice that the off tank is already doing is taking a unique angle here. Now, it is very, very important to already highlight that your team moves as an amoeba. You guys commented about this before, but you want to move as a unit to different spots as best as possible. Now, if your tank is diving, let's say, for example, we have Hulk who's taking an off angle, and the plus side is we're getting a benefit boost here with Iron Man and Hulk, which you'll see is interesting later because they are going to switch this comp shortly after, and you're going to see some of the mistakes, but it's important. Even the first fight really tells you a lot about how the enemy team is going to play. Can they counter what you're doing, and can you dynamically switch on where you believe their weak spots are? So what's interesting about the pathing of this Hulk is, yes, they're by themselves, but also just the fact that they are able to position as well as they are. And it's fascinating to kind of just see as they're moving in and how they decide to position and how much that matters. So one of the biggest things, let's go ahead and take a look as they move in. You'll notice that the Hulk is here. Let's go ahead and pause in this moment too. You see how they're left. Remember, we just commented about that. But also that the fact that they're waiting here almost ready. If somebody did run in through this side, now the team does go through this side and they are moving as a pack. You can see them through the walls. They're moving as a pack there, but the Hulk technically is positioned ready to catch somebody out to garner a pick. Now, if they do catch them out, they can push them forward, pull them back, and DPS them, but also use this area as cover. It is fascinating the difference between a pro player and just a regular player and the difference that it does make in terms of overall positioning. Now, because they know that they can't catch them out here, this is where they start to shift a little bit. So Hulk is taking an angle and the team is grouped up yet again. So let's take a look at that dive and what everything looks like. Now, I'm sorry that the bird's eye view is a little glitchy here, but you can see, we could just at least see where everyone's located. So we see the amoeba in the back and we see the Hulk diving, looking for an opportunity while they are stacked up. So we have two grouped up teams versus one that is essentially looking for a pick here. And they're looking around and they're trying to find where's that opportunity. Most teams, when you're looking around, aren't going to do that. You'll kind of see that they're usually spread out like this in a normal pub match. But you'll notice in higher tier lobbies that this makes a big difference. We're looking at the pretty much a championship game, I believe, of Top Soil versus Philosophy, and the difference that it makes when you're teamed up. Dive is a lot harder to pull off whenever you are playing in a higher level because they're anticipating it. They'll focus fire it, and it makes it easier for picks because everything they're looking for is for somebody to be isolated and out of position. Now, at the lower tier, this is much easier to pull off because people get distracted. They don't look for things that are in front of them. They don't look for these mistakes, and they'll keep up onks, Namor, things on the ground, things of that nature. So let's take a look what the Hulk is doing here and his positioning. So right off the rip, it's interesting here is that there is a split focus fire as well, but also where the Hulk is positioned. He is technically making sure that he isn't running, like he's not on top of them directly right here. He's still using this wall to ensure that he minimizes damage, but because of that, he's only focused on the Strange. As we keep looking at the VOD, which is interesting, is remember the teammates are further behind, but they're focused on a different DPS, so they're technically not focus fired properly. The hard part about focus firing, this is easier said than done, is it does make a massive difference, those seconds, but every second that you're not focus firing something together is putting less pressure on the opponent, because you'll notice that he's attacking the Strange, but they're almost got the Bucky. Technically, in this moment, he could give up space and technically get the Bucky, and that could have created an opening. But at the same time, this team is very good at pivoting. So let's take a look at this. Ready? Now, remember, what we're learning here together as well are concepts. One thing that you'll notice later is that you'll notice that a lot of the tanks are going to do a lot of damage. They're going to be pulling their weight. A lot of tanks realize they think that they're just a meat shield, and same with healers, that they're just heal botting, is that you have to do more in terms of your role to also DPS and find CC. CC stands for crowd control, meaning that you're stunning, putting somebody to sleep, freezing them, pushing them out, pulling them in, anything that immobilizes an opponent. So CC is very important. But also, we also talked about the term earlier in terms of staggering. Let's say once you get eliminated, you're going to start seeing each of these start to, teammates start to go down. The Magneto goes down first. That whenever they stagger, it's bad. So what they do is they say, okay, one got eliminated. They go back in the pot back here, right? And you notice that they start regrouping as they start getting eliminated. And once they're ready to go, they'll go as a group to push. That is so important not to stagger, and that's a great terminology to learn. Is you can call it stagger, you can call it reset, resetting together. And this is assuming everyone has a mechanical skill that you need to know your combos and your positioning. So let's continue to watch this. I know this is already a lot early on. It's going to be a very long video, but I promise you're going to learn a lot. And we're going to learn together. I'm not the best tank, FYI. I'm not a great tank. Because I've healed so much in DPS, you know what you look for in terms of a tank. Now, already here, the Hulk is great at repositioning, but because, while he wasn't the focus, he is trying to find another pick here on the outside to try to do something, but they have already lost their healer and their Magneto. Their Magneto was technically, you could call it overextended by trying to push forward, wasn't able to get heals, but they were able to get a pick, this team, and they were able to stabilize out. And because of that, it caused this team to kind of cause some disarray. And so the dive isn't working, unfortunately. Even though the Hulk does have great positioning, I think the biggest issue is that this could have worked, but this team was very well coordinated. And so they said, you know what? We're going to try something new. And so we're going to follow the Doctor Strange, and we're going to learn about the off tank later on in the video by watching the Magneto during domination as well. So this team pretty much gets caught out. They have to reposition. Everyone is pretty much waiting. You see here that they're starting to wait for their group. They have some space here, but as they start to stagger, they're trying to wait again and do some damage. So the off tank is here, and he pulls back. He's shielding himself until the switch. And what's coming in now, as they find a position, you'll notice that the position that they take together, let's look at the bird's eye view, that they take together is that hallway. Now, unfortunately, their Psylocke was pretty much waiting, but as they wait and they group up together as one big group instead of just running in one at a time, because trust me, they could have just gone in and got eliminated, but they are looking for damage, looking for poke, and they're maintaining pressure, and then they pretty much go back in. Now, they decided to go Strange because they're not going to go for a dive, but they're going to try to look for picks, and we're going to follow the Strange throughout here and see what he does as he pushes forward for his team. So they've gotten a lot of damage, and the DPS in the front, as they get damage, they start to push back their Strange. That damage is important, so let's take a look at that too as they start to find this opening. Because you'll notice here that they're pretty good at maintaining their pressure, and their Strange kind of overextends, but not really. But because of that, they say, okay, now we push forward. So as a tank, this is also important. Once you start getting an advantage and you start maintaining pressure and you notice they're moving up, don't give them space, disrespect it, and continue to move forward. Moving forward is very important, even if gaining inches or feet can be monumental. And of course, in this game, more meters. Depending on your own conversion, you can do that. But every bit of space matters in terms of you pushing the team and finding that positioning. Right now, they have more of the height, so they're pushing them down, and they're pushing forward on this point. They're finding an opening. They could have stalled there. Keep in mind, they could have been stalled. But you'll notice that the biggest important asset that a tank can bring is momentum and creating space. When you don't have tanks, this becomes pretty detrimental. Now, they tried. They try to find an ult, and they try to find an opportunity here. So let's take a look at what went wrong here. Even though they garnered this space, right? Because they had the space, and so there's not a bad thing they move forward on this at all. So he tries to go for the pulse charge, and unfortunately, because of their Hawkeye was able to get some really good picks and start picking off their Iron Man, and it caused some trades here, and it pretty much had them fall apart. Now, that doesn't deter them. Notice the important thing is that they know that their push wasn't bad. They use utility, and they popped an ultimate, and they go again for this because they know that they can keep it together because they're finding weak spots, right? So let's take a look how they go around this time and say, okay, well, that didn't work. Their Strange is getting absolutely decimated from damage. And they say it is working what they're doing. They are garnering ground. So it's just a matter of timing their ultimates properly and not making the mistake. You'll notice as well, notice how much pressure the Strange is doing on this Strange and pretty much diffing him in that scenario. Now, because they lost the Strange and the Hawkeye, they realize the Hawkeye is a big threat, and so eliminating the Hawkeye pretty early on makes a monumental difference. What's really interesting is that we're only halfway through this round. But let's bring up the scoreboard and talk about this, because not all stats are reflective of exactly what's going on. This Hawkeye could claim that, hey, I'm pulling all the weight, what is happening, everybody? But the enemy team has realized this, and they're looking at the Hawkeye and realizing this is their biggest threat. And they changed as well. They made an adjustment, because they were running Iron Man, and maybe their Iron Man is one of the best in the game, but they realized that they had to continue to make shifts to ensure that they beat this team. One thing that a tank is able to help you do as well to realize is that the pacing isn't working. If they're pushing up properly and maintaining their damage as well as they are, that there's a bigger thing happening in this moment. I would really think a great change to Marvel Rivals is to be able to see all of these stats in real time, so then your team can continue to make adjustments as needed. This game is really heavy on making adjustments based on what is presented in front of you. And you'll notice that people start shifting, so it's important to have multiple mains. I learned this pretty early on, and keep in mind, this is still one of my first real like hero shooters similar to Overwatch, but it is so important. So I'm giving you this tip because I have learned it myself. And everything I learned, I want to share with you, and I hope that you're finding this very helpful, because as I learn, hopefully everyone else can continue to thrive and even do better than me. Maybe you guys are going to absolutely thrive and do better. So because of this, they found their weak spot, but this enemy team does not make adjustments fast enough to counter them and realize that even though their Hawkeye is carrying immensely, the biggest thing they could do is say, okay, well, we need to defend the Hawkeye at all costs. But at the same time, they're not making changes to do that. And because of that, they're able to have extremely great holds, and their change based on how to counter them and read the room has been monumental to this team's success together. Which is why there's a difference between having your dive tank and saying, okay, dive isn't working. And it's okay if it doesn't work. It's not always going to work. But also, let's look at the positioning here as they start to move up. Is that while the Magneto is an off tank and has a shield, the Strange is still, even though it has a big shield, is using cover and making sure that they aren't just full diving and then giving them the pick that they're looking for. That they're taking this moment by moment and still respecting cover and providing some respect to this team. You'll notice that the respect quickly shifts and changes once they realize they have the momentum here. They have great cover, they're waiting for them. And the Strange, this is really big, goes for a massive ult here. This was such big brain in terms of your play and making sure that you can surprise with your ultimate. That was a monumental play. We see it here, the hover above. They didn't see the Strange, and granted they got a pick, and because they got the pick, they thought, oh my gosh, guys, continue to move forward and push, but they had no idea what was coming, which is really great utility and a mastery and understanding of your character. So when you're using your utility, such as an ultimate, you'll notice that even Magneto makes a mistake later with this, and everyone makes mistakes, but having this foresight, because this team knows that the Strange is going to have this ult. You always know that who's got ult or what's happening, and their Strange technically also has an ult. But this ultimate here was monumental. Boom. This is going to cause a lot of loss for their team. And look, don't sleep on tanks. They got so much damage and pressure there. That's game changing. And that's from just a tank. We're not even talking DPS. When you look at this here, their tanks are right behind their DPS in terms of overall damage and plays. Tanks maintain the course of your momentum. Now, let's say you had 4 DPS and 2 healers. You're pretty much going for full dive and just praying that something sticks. But a tank is able to find those opportunities, and essentially it's like slowing things down slightly, but able to push and maintain consistent pressure, because if you just have all DPS, it's not consistent pressure because they're constantly having to repeak and heal. Do not sleep in your tanks. They're going to be monumental to and game changing when you have a really great one. And realize if you're not doing this as a tank and you're not DPSing properly, you're not positioning well, you're not just a meat shield, okay? You are more than a meat shield. You're able to carry your team. A fantastic group is able to wall off opponents, wall off a Strange. Because you may be asking, what could this team done? Well, if they realize a Strange is working and they need to isolate out, well, a Groot could definitely provide that power. You know, it looks like they're still, in terms of running, they don't switch that strat, and they try to go for a Hail Mary here. But you'll notice that because the Hail Mary doesn't work, they lose a healer pretty quick on that team. Let's back up and realize when that happens. Let's look at the POV of the healer, because it's really important, and you'll see how fast they got isolated out. Ready? And there it is. The off tank, that was such a great moment. These tanks are making and breaking these fights. Making and breaking. That was monumental, because that pretty much causes a disarray. They're down a healer. And Luna's, you know, they're 3 healing this, trying to push forward, which is strange. They could have 2 tanked this instead. But now they have 2 healers. One is extremely low. They have their ultimate. And they're trying to pivot. I guess you can say they're trying to pivot from what they once had. So let's take a look if they're changing any of that. No, they want the 3 healer out. They're going for this strat, and it just unfortunately isn't hitting properly. That's whenever, and you'll notice, because they're sticking so hard with it and saying this is the only thing we can do, it just doesn't work for them. So let's go ahead and look back, and these tanks are finding these phenomenal openings, and it's just becoming easy for them at this point. All right, so let's see how this overall ends here. Now that we saw that the Mantis pretty much got obliterated, and they're trying to hold, but their DPS is definitely lacking. They're really relying on their Hawkeye to really pull this out, but unfortunately the DPS and the focus fire just isn't there from the enemy team. Now these comps can work. I'm not saying 3 healers can't work, but the reason why I chose this specifically is that you're seeing just how 2 fantastic tanks that are in sync together trying to find those moments, because they noticed that the dive isn't working because they could survive a lot of that burst, and they slowed it down a little bit to find those picks and find those weak spots and where the healers aren't necessarily focused. And it's really proving to be monumental to their success, and it's why they're able to mop both of these back to back. And you'll notice that they start to switch it up a little bit in terms of the characters, because now they went from the Hawkeye going from Psylocke to Bucky, but it's too little too late at this moment. Towards the end, a lot of the changes need to happen early on, because now, I mean, a lot of what you're commentating and seeing is like, there's really not much to talk, because they are pretty much in shambles and they're isolating everybody. But if you look at this Strange is doing a great job in terms of damage. Their damage output is phenomenal, and making sure that they're keeping this team at bay. Can there be areas where they focus fire and improve together? Yes, 100%. Everyone can always play better. And when you VOD review and you're looking at this, ask yourself, was I focus firing what my teammate was looking at? How was my DPS? Was I keeping up great uptime? What was I doing? What wasn't I doing? What can I do to improve? What can I do to fix things? How could I position? How could I be with the team? What is the biggest threat in the enemy team, and what is their tactic? What are they trying to pull off here? And unfortunately, the enemy team realizes this, and they see it. I mean, when you look at it here, we see what comps they're running, and we see that they're making slight adjustments, but they're not pulling off from the 3 healer strat, which is interesting, because I think if they would have done something a bit bigger, maybe this team would have gotten back to dive or switched things up. But the biggest issue here is that they're just getting diffed based on the tanks, and they're able to dwindle them down, and they're able to find those openings. So now, I know we followed the Strange before. We're going to follow the Magneto and look at some of the mistakes and what they're doing, and we'll look at it from everything from there. Again, if you're enjoying this series, don't forget to leave a like. I think there's a lot to learn here consistently. Now, at the start here, they definitely push a little too hard here. This was a great sleep on the Magneto as well. This Magneto overextended. Like I said, everyone makes mistakes. It happens. So let's look at this again, and let's slow it down a little bit, so we can really see this moment to moment. Oh, they're grouped up very well together at the start here. I think everything at the start, moving together as a unit, is working out very, very well. But the downside is that their Strange decides to move back just a little bit. Their Magneto really face plants here. And so let's take a pause and let's see where the other teammates are located. And let's just do free cam, and let's essentially just back up just a little there and just see where they're at. Okay, now that we see the positioning, and this is a little bit more clear now, we see that the Magneto is definitely overextended. A lot of their DPS and healers can see him, but where's the Strange? The Strange is essentially, let's take a look. Let's go ahead and click his POV and let's take a look at that. Has gone up in the air. It was very hard to see them. Essentially out of the fight. So if we keep this going and we'll slow it down, let's just free cam and see where the positioning essentially goes awry. And let's hit play. All right, let's take a look at that. Right now, the sleep is what made a massive difference here. Their Mantis got a massive CC. That makes a big difference. And because a sleep happens, these two are isolated over here. And we got the team split. And look at them move as a group. And they realize that. And they push them. And they get that pick. And it causes a major issue. Now, the Mantis does get a really great sleep on their Strange, trying to stop that. And their Strange does move forward here. Isolating out, at this point, the Luna. And turning things over because of their fly up. So you can also look at this as bait. Maybe they were going for that bait. But I also kind of... It seems like a mistake based on their positioning. And I won't know based on going on the comm. So let's take a look at that again whenever the Strange does come in. With the Eye of Agamotto whenever they're up in the air. Because he's done this multiple times. This play has been really big on the Strange's part. And really diffing here. Because their sleep there and their counter, it could have been happenstance as well, but they did great by going in and making a ballsy play because they knew they were grouped up. Even though the Amoeba, it was successful there, they were able to isolate out, and the Strange was able to do... This Strange is phenomenal, being able to find those openings and using his jump in the air as leverage in terms of finding new positioning that doesn't exist. I would never have thought about doing that. And that's why this guy is much better than me on Strange. And looking at that, I mean, there's a lot we can learn about that together in terms of using unique positioning, because then while they did, you know, lose their Magneto, they were able to clean that up and pretty much diff them. That was a phenomenal play. Looking at that, that was huge. I'm thoroughly impressed by how they played that. But again, a lot to learn in terms of play. Because something goes wrong, it doesn't mean it's over. Just because there's a sleep, somebody takes damage. If you have utility and your team has it, you can still come to the rescue and do something. The Doctor Strange rescue there, huge. I think what this Magneto is great at doing is baiting. He does overextend, but he's looking for the enemy team to make mistakes. And that means that these tanks are talking really well together. Because that wouldn't have happened if the Magneto was like, I'm slept, they're on me, I've got pressure, I'm pushing them. You'll also notice that's really big. Let's take a look at this as well. Most tanks don't do this, and I'm trying to capture the moment. Let's go to slow motion so we can capture it exactly. Is that because they have a new threat with Namor, right? That the tanks don't just ignore the pressure from Namor's sentry units, which means Namor would have to be smarter and put them up on the walls to hide them. But these tanks are great at DPSing and focus firing stuff on the ground and getting things out when they need to. They're not letting the Namor receive any pressure. And they are DPS things that matter on the floor and saying, no, we're not leaving that up. It matters to us. We're not keeping it there. And so that really helps, having tanks that are self-aware, that aren't just going to keep tanking those things, that they're going to maintain that pressure, that they're going to DPS. Let's say if there's an Onk on the ground, this team would definitely grab those Onks. It's very clear that they're going to keep DPSing those squids because they know that that would put a lot more pressure and they're removing the damage. But also look at their DPS. They're assisting their tanks by keeping that pressure low. And they're not giving them any room to breathe. Also, another great freeze on the right there. The healers are also, because the tanks are here, the healers are able to maintain. It makes everyone's job easier whenever the tanks are doing their jobs. And if they're going above and beyond their jobs, they create those openings. Now, this is a mistake by the Magneto. He is putting the ult to scare them in case they pressure forward. But it does hit the wall, but it also scares them. So you can call it a mistake. It may not be one per se because it throws and then it just crashes right here. And then, well, that's kind of a waste of an ult. But it did scare them back. And remember, when you're playing domination, time is everything. Another 5 seconds can buy you everything of winning the round versus not. And just keeping them off point. So now as we're speeding up, taking a look at this, you know, they are popping their healer ults and they're putting pressure. Their tanks also move forward, that the DPS are behind them. And that the DPS aren't overextending. And when they do, you have a dive like Psylocke. She's also backing up, making sure the tanks are maintaining pressure. They're killing the squids. They're maintaining it. And even though Psylocke could maintain pressure on the DPS, they're making sure that that extra damage is not a threat. This team is extremely well coordinated and pulling a lot together. And granted, yeah, this is a tournament play, but there's a lot to learn from it because casual players don't do this. And even just having a few casual players or a few tanks, any tank who's watching this is doing this, because trust me, you can watch guides all day that tell you, oh, this is how you DPS, this is a great combo, did you think about doing this? If you don't implement anything into practice and isolate things out, you are not going to be better as a team. Now, this gets a little hectic right here, and you can tell, and you see, look, that was another brilliant thing. DPSing these things down. I mean, the prioritization is so big. The Magneto, even though we could talk about the Strange as we did last round, is doing amazing plays, they're focusing who's low. Notice immediately, they said the Rocket's low, let's focus the Rocket, let's get the healer out. You know, and then let's take out whoever's next. They're focusing who's their bigger threat. Wait a minute, this is up. Namor that, let's block, right? Block as well. There's a lot of quick prioritization. What is the biggest threat? What can you minimize and take out to make sure that they don't have proper utility? Now, that was a good push on the enemy team's part, but now they got them back in this wall, and the tanks are moving up, and they're moving as a conglomerate. It's very slept on that even though, like, Psylocke is one, but you'll never see the Bucky overextend. Technically, what the Bucky could do is grapple more people in, but the tanks are already doing such a great job of pressuring that it's almost unnecessary at this point. But hey, it's just something to, everybody can always improve and fix things, right? Let's take a look at the damage. Look at this damage. 9,000, 9,800. The DPS have free reign to do whatever they want. The Namor's doing a lot of damage, but still, they're taking out a lot of those squids, and it's causing this massive diff to happen. And because they have healers, their healers are also trying to DPS, but they're lacking the DPS in this department to create any openings, but their tanks are also taking them out really, really effectively. Because realistically, yes, they have more healing, but again, I chose this font specifically because it really highlights that you just can't heal bot your way to success. Everyone has to throw out proper crowd control and isolate out who is the bigger threat. And if you take away from that, then I promise you, you're going to improve. Amazing job from these tanks. Amazing job. It was a pleasure just to get to watch, and I hope that you enjoyed as well, just watching this breakdown across the board. Let me know if you want more of this. You know, this is high level tips. I mean, everyone could call it basic in terms of what you're looking at, but at the end of the day, people don't do this. I don't see this in gameplay. I don't see this in quick match, and even lower tier ranked, even upper tier from Diamond to, I've seen prior GMs in gold that just forget these fundamentals and forget why it works. And it takes a lot to focus on. It's a lot to take in. It's not easy to always keep, now DPS this, do that, do that. Don't blank out as a tank, okay? Realize that you are just as important, if not one of the most important roles, along with the healer class, and that you make the DPS shine. If you do your job well, I mean, it's one of those roles that unfortunately just doesn't have a lot of the thankful moments. It's like, it's an unthankful job because when you do it well, people don't notice. The DPS just shine more. The DPS look better and say, wow, your DPS really clutched out and did a lot there. But trust me, you are bringing a lot of value. So if you enjoyed the series by spectating and improving, leave a like, leave a comment. I feel like we learned a lot together today, and I'll see you all in the next one.